feel like these days a lot of people really are intrigued about the idea of getting out of their internal combustion engine car and into an EV. But they just need that little extra push, that bit of intrigue, that bit of added interest above the drivetrain in order to do that. And with that, I give you the Polestar 2. The first thing about the Polestar 2 that makes it intriguing is that it's not an SUV. It might be based off the XC40 platform, but unlike the e-tron and the Mercedes, this is a hatchback, and a pretty spacious one at that. Then there's the overall design of it, which is, well, simple, but really quite elegant and striking, I think. It certainly gets an awful lot of looks. There's a sort of slab-sided big volume to it, which in pictures makes it seem, well, pretty huge. But actually in real life, it's nice and compact. It's actually shorter than a BMW 3 Series. I also love this, they call it the visor graphic on the side of the car, which reminds me of, well, another Swedish manufacturer, sadly no longer with us. Surely this is the modern incarnation of a Saab. The Polestar 2 is of course not made in Sweden, it's made in China because Geely owns Volvo and therefore Polestar. But coming back to the Scandinavian Norse angle, a bit of Norse mythology in here, Thor's hammer in the front lights. It's pretty good, isn't it? And around the back, they've got 288 LEDs in the rear lights, and they look a bit like Kit from Knight Rider. One other thing I just want to mention whilst we're out here, the badge. Look at that. It's a really cool piece of design, I think. And I love the fact that it's matched to the body colour of each individual car. It's just in matte rather than gloss. Anyway, let's go and have a sit inside. The interior of this car is every bit as intriguing and striking, really, as the exterior. We'll come back to the big screen in a bit because I've got more to say about that. But one of the taglines of this is vegan as standard. So all the materials in here are, well, vegan. This is a vegan vinyl look leather on the steering wheel. These materials here, it's nice, it's quite tactile actually. It'll be intriguing to see how they all sort of wear and mark up, but it feels premium. There is a key, but it's a fairly unattractive thing, but that's because in future your phone will actually act as the key, so this will be fairly redundant. Then there's no starter button, because this is bum activated, which is the other thing. If you were a child, you'd laugh at that. Bum activated. What that means is that you just get in, foot on the brake, select drive, and off you can go. First things first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the route that we're going to drive today, because just over there is Grendon, which is a substation on the national grid. In fact, it's on the line of the first ever 400 kilovolt electricity lines installed in the UK in 1965. Now we need to end up at Millbrook, and this line goes from there all the way down, just past the end of the Millbrook Proving Ground. So I thought we'd follow it across country. In case you hadn't worked that out, it's because the car's electric. You see electricity lines following the electricity down the... I thought it was obvious. Now the first thing you notice in here is, well, the wing mirrors actually. They're brilliant. They're frameless. It's such a simple thing. You know, no cameras with screens here or anything like that. But they allow them apparently to be 30% smaller, so therefore more aerodynamic, and they just look so clean and give you such a lovely image. Then there's the actual sort of glass house. It feels quite airy in here, which is odd because it's quite a shallow sort of opening there, the DLO, the daylight opening. But because you've got the panoramic roof, which is standard, there's a nice sort of atmosphere, quite thin A-pillars, and you've still got that wraparound feeling to the view out. Power lines. One of the things that I feel may draw people to the Polestar 2 is Google.
You see, this is the first car to be designed with a Google operating system built in. What this means is that the voice recognition system actually works. You can summon an address to navigate to via Google Maps, or you can ask Google to turn the heated seats on, or find Test Match Special on the radio, or play track 9 of the Oasis album What's the Story? Morning Glory. It is, of course, She's Electric. If you have a home suitably connected to a Gmail account, then you can ask it to turn the lights on or open the garage door in advance of your arrival back at the castle. Yes, Big Brother is watching, but it works brilliantly, and frankly I feel a lot of other manufacturers will be scrabbling to catch up.
Pylons, here's an interesting thing. Actually they're called transmission towers, but we all know them as pylons because when the national grid was being set up in the 1920s, the country was obsessed with Egypt. Egyptology. Hey Google, what's a pylon in Egyptology?
The pylon was the large gate at the front of the temple. The walls of the pylon were decorated with carved and painted scenes of the pharaoh, gods and goddesses.
So now you know. In terms of performance, this still has that electric car kick. It might not be the most powerful, but 0 to 62 in 4.7 seconds, which is pretty good given this weighs 2.1 tons. It still has that absolute sort of slightly unsettling surge from the electric motors. We've got one electric motor in the front, one in the back, both 150 kilowatts, so 300 kilowatts overall, which is 402 brake horsepower, 487 pounds-foot of torque, and yeah, performance in a straight line is ample. From a driving perspective though, what really interests me is the single pedal operation. So go into here, then we have different levels. It's on standard at the moment, which is the strongest amount of regenerative braking that you can have. And from a performance aspect, actually I think your throttle control would improve from driving one of these because you have to be really sensitive in the way that you apply it and then lift off. Apply it obviously because you've got that instant torque, and then lifting off. If you're not careful, then the regen, well, you get a very sort of jerky rise. You need to be just subtle about it. But you can do entire journeys without ever touching the brake pedal. It is extraordinary. It's quite odd to get used to, but I really, really like it. And obviously, you get more range if you use stronger regen.
Talking of range, the WLTP figure for the Polestar is 292 miles, which is decent, without being exceptional. And of course this is with the 78 kWh battery brimmed, when the recommendation is only to fill to 80% in order to preserve the life of the battery. However, range anxiety can be alleviated by Google Maps telling you very accurately just how much battery it will have when you arrive at your destination. Or it can route you via a charging point to save you running out.
I actually quite like the idea of just taking a bit more time sitting and having a coffee while you charge up. Hey Google, what's the best independent coffee shop near here?
The out-of-office coffee house on Market Place is 1 mile away.
That'll do.
But although there is a big focus on the range of specific cars, to me the bigger problem with EVs at the moment seems to be the charging network. Without any unification of the different charging points, it all feels quite confusing to someone newly inducted into the EV sphere. You know there is a charging point down the road from the coffee shop, but then you find that it's one that you're not subscribed to. Imagine only being allowed to fill up with petrol at Shell garages. Alright, I know it's not quite that bad, and for some there is the convenience of charging at home, but from what I can see there is still plenty of work to do in this area.
Let's talk about the big screen, because I'm not a fan of screens in cars. I like a physical button, and there are still some physical buttons here. So you've got the crucial things: demist, rear screen, volume, play and pause, and then hazard warning lights. They are all still physical buttons down here. The rest is all done by this big screen, and it actually works. I know, I'm staggered by it, but it's perfect. It's set up in portrait orientation, which again might seem a little odd. That's obviously like other cars we have seen, but it works. And the reason for doing that is because it shows more on a map, because obviously if you're going up the screen, then that works better and you can see further ahead with the map. And also because in terms of scrolling, you have longer lists, so you don't actually have to scroll as much, you don't have to touch the screen as much. when you know that, it makes sense. Plus, people are used to looking at their phones, so everything's kind of where you'd expect in terms of sort of battery of your phone, whether you've got 4G connection and all that sort of thing. The other things are laid out nicely, so you've got the sort of the principal menus nicely in your eye line just there, so you're not having to peer down here, and the buttons are big enough, which is perhaps the most crucial thing of all, because you don't want to be trying to fiddle around reaching for things that you just can't quite. Where is it? This menu down here? It works. It's nice and simple, nice and easy to navigate. I actually like it. The drive mode in here, we've got different options in terms of steering feel: light, standard, firm. Firm feels best, I think. And then just the regen, as I've said before, so off, low or standard. Oh, and creep as well. But I think if you've got the regen on, then you want the creep off, because that way you can come to a full stop with the regen. You don't need to touch the brake pedal. Now, as I said, most of this car is, well, as standard. You get all of it thrown in for your £46,000, but there is one crucial option on this, and that is the performance pack.
Priced at £5,000, it isn't cheap, but you do get golden seatbelts. They're actually yellow. You also get gold-coloured dust caps, so be careful where you park. Anyway, more pertinently to performance, you get larger 20-inch wheels, bigger Brembo front brakes, and perhaps most intriguingly, Öhlins dual flow valve manually adjustable dampers.
The reason for the golden seatbelts is because they talk about a golden ride. That's what they were aiming for in this. The sort of ride you get in and think, yes, that is just spot on. Have they achieved that? Well, I'm not sure. In this performance pack car, they have entirely. So there are 22 clicks of adjustment all around. We're on 12 at the moment, 22 being the softest, so we're kind of somewhere in the middle, and it is pretty firm. It just gets a bit bobbly. The big primary ride impacts are still really well absorbed, and you can tell that they're sophisticated dampers. There is a plushness there, a way that they soak up the bigger bumps. But yes, Polestar wanted to set itself apart from Volvo by not having quite the sort of just the smooth ride that they have. But even so, I think most customers are going to want to slacken these off. Why not go for an electrically adjustable damper? Because they said most people like the idea of just having their own setting, and once they've found it, they can just leave it there. I like a passive damper, I understand that, and it's quite intriguing. Again, it's another of those things. The screen will interest some people. A set of manually adjustable Öhlins dampers will certainly appeal to other people, like me.
I did actually try adjusting the dampers, and it's certainly not the work of a moment. The fronts are easy enough as the knob is on the bottom, stop sniggering, but the rears are rather tucked away up behind the arch liners. I tried the comfort setting, 18 on the front and 20 on the rear, for a few miles, and it was more forgiving, but certainly still no magic carpet ride.
So what's it actually like to drive with its fancy Öhlins dampers? Is it interactive and wriggling with feel through the steering? And no, it's not. It's not those things. It's a nice sort of clean car to drive. You can feel the sophistication of the dampers and the way it leans into them, and that's really appealing. I like that. It does feel like a heavy car. When you're driving it normally with the regen, that disguises the weight really well, I think. But when you actually start to push on, when you have to use the hydraulic brakes, the big Brembos at the front, that's when you start to notice the 2.1 tons. Oh. In terms of adjustability, well, there kind of isn't any really. It's just a case of dissecting a road using all that extreme grip and acceleration and the precision of the chassis. Definitely quick though. And here we are at Millbrook. The actual line continues all the way on down towards Luton, but we're stopping here.
After a day with the Polestar 2, I found myself thinking that if I was in the market for an EV as a daily driver, then this is probably the one that I would go for. Like most EVs, it's afflicted with a hefty curb weight. Also, the driving experience only rises to the levels of interesting, rather than actually tactile and engaging like a hot hatch, despite the, shall we say, connected ride of this performance pack car. However, the looks, the clever tech, the general sense of quality, and even those Öhlins dampers are all things that make this interesting and desirable. I suppose what I'm saying is that perhaps the biggest compliment I can give the Polestar 2 is that it's covetable, regardless of its powertrain.